What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Hot Take. Excuse me recording with my phone today. We're on a bit of a time crunch. The owner needs his car back in a little over an hour. But today we are in a 2000 Mercedes CLK 320 with the V6 making 215 horsepower. This car in particular is bone stock and is absolute cream puff. Only 57,000 miles on this guy, which makes this one of the nicest versions of these things I've ever seen. I haven't spent a lot of time in these early 2000s Mercedes, but driving out to this shoot with 80s music on and honestly just in the nicest one of these ever made me feel like a business exec in 2000. But I'm gonna go ahead and hop on the road and show you guys what that feels like. So my initial impressions of this Mercedes, I drove it on the way here, is that it is extremely smooth. Even over these bumps, not just in the ride, but also in the operation. We'll talk about that in a second. Over these bumps, it just glides right over a lot of them. You do feel some of it. It's not as deadened as, say, a big luxury sedan like an S-Class or 7 Series or Jaguar or anything like that. But for the size of the car that it is, it's very smooth. Ride is extremely nice over these rough patches of road. And then in the operation too, like the transmission, the transmission in this thing is a sweetie. Throw your foot down, get a little bit of good 6-cylinder torque, and it shifts like nothing's happening. This is one of the smoothest, for this era anyways, transmissions I've ever felt in a car. It is just so smooth. It is so nice. We'll load it up on some turns here because the other part of this car is it is also really fun, which is not something you usually expect from an old grandma car. Mercedes, this is the Monsters Inc. Mercedes. You have that front end, the funny headlights. I always thought it was kind of a weird looking car, but it's cool. I like it. This thing, 57,610 miles, is as slick as it ever was. And it is an extremely nice experience in here. All the materials are nice. There's a little bit cheap plastic on the dashboard, but what are you gonna do? They had to cut costs somewhere. But steering wheel's nice, leather's nice, and this has the funniest cup holders I've ever seen in a car, which is saying a lot because I've seen Saab cup holders, and those things are also extremely weird. Hit another turn up here, use the brakes. Brakes are pretty solid. It's not a terribly good feel, but as far as a luxury car goes, it's good enough. Coming around more of these turns here, it just soaks up the curves. It's so much fun. Just kind of throw it in. You don't really even need a lot of RPM. This thing has a lot of really good torque down at wherever the transmission likes to keep you, which seems to be really conservative at like 1800. Not bad at all. When I was looking up stats for these cars, I noticed that there was a big weight disparity between 3200 and 3600. I'm guessing the heavier one would be the convertible V8, whereas this is the V6 convertible. I don't know exactly what this weighs. I'll throw it up on screen, but it feels probably around the 3200, 3300 pound range. It's not super light, but it's not very heavy either. It is quite a bit floaty, I will say, over a lot of these turns. There is this fair amount of body roll, which you do kind of have to be ready for. But it's very predictable, very planted. I have no problems with the driving experience in that regard. Down low, the motor feels torquey enough. You don't really have to push this thing to get good power out of it. Like half throttle. Long automatic gearing. It's got a little bit of pickup once you kind of get higher in the rev range, but you do kind of have to get it out there. I'm going to guess because of the gearing. You can definitely tell that Mercedes tuned this car a lot for comfort and not for speed. We'll give it a little bit here. Very long gearing. I wonder if that was second or third. We do have a pseudo manual mode down here. As opposed to the BMW slap and shift, this is just the slap shift. I don't actually know if that's the technical term for it, but you know, I'm not really gonna bother using it because, I don't know, it's a Mercedes. I don't feel that it's right to really use that in a Mercedes, but you can do it. I've used it on others before. It works really well for what it is. But the transmission in this car is kind of a slush box. It's just smooth, and that's about all you can ask it to do. But you know what? For this car, it's perfectly good. Half throttle again. Yeah, that gearing definitely slows this car down. I don't think they ever made manuals in these. I know they made manuals in some of the earlier Mercedes, but I think a 5-speed in this car would actually be a lot of fun. Yeah, when you get on the brakes, it gets really front-end plowy, so you got to be a little mindful of that. I mean, it could be worn-out suspension, but this car is pretty minty. I would not expect that from this thing. Aha! It's a 5-speed automatic. Okay. 1 and 2 are pretty short. Give you a nice 0 to 60, and then you get the third, and it gets a lot longer. So, that is what it's been doing. It's been using third and fourth gear most of the time. I guess I've been missing first gear this entire time. Maybe for the sake of smoothness, it starts off in second. But nevertheless, if you want to put your foot down, this car has what you need. It'll give you the beans. Oh man, that's so much fun. Talking about some of the features, so if we come here, it's funny, the first time I started this car, and I haven't been able to replicate it because I wanted to get on video, there's like a little phone sound almost from this area as well as from the beep. I'm guessing this car could have been equipped with a factory phone, because you also have a little phone dial there, which, I mean, come on, that's definitely for putting phone numbers in. I have a radio. I was saying that earlier, the cup holders like pops up and comes out. Like, look at that. Super cool. And you kind of push it up. I don't know if that's supposed to be automatic or not, but doesn't matter. It works enough. Have all these classic 2000s German car like push to open levers, and you know, you get all those things, but reminds me a lot of older V12s in sound. It's got that really like almost luxury, very deep, substantial sound to it, especially going to that third gear. I've spent some time in a lot of like E38 7 Series models, and it almost feels like that, but on a smaller scale, of course, which is cool. Mercedes went very high end with this car, which for the size almost doesn't make sense. I think this is supposed to be comparable to this almost be like a 5 Series convertible from a BMW, which I'm just using because I know BMWs. And it's much higher end than any convertible BMW really made from the era. So if you wanted a luxury convertible, you had to go with Mercedes. I'm guessing there was Jaguar too, but as far as the Germans go, yeah, if you get off the throttle, it's really keen to just throw you right back down out of the power band. So if you want power in this car, you gotta mean it. You gotta really want the power. This thing is not in a hurry to throw you to the higher RPMs. For a 2000s car though, this thing is plenty. That's all you would need. I also noticed on the left here is where your seat controls are. You have 3 memory settings, and then if you want to get in the back, which there is like 0 backseat room for someone my size. It is not tall person friendly. But if you hop in the back, the seat automatically kind of moves forward. It's like a semi-automatic motion, just like the top, which I may show you here. We'll see how much time we have. But it's semi-automatic. This latch undoes it, and then you use the button and the center here, pull it up, and the top goes back. It's funny how quiet this car is. They really did tune this thing to just be insulated. Even with the convertible top, you get a little bit of wind noise, but it's not too bad relative to other convertibles from the era anyway. But very little road noise. Glide right around these turns. This is the equivalent of an Autobahn burner. This car is really most at home on the freeway and smooth road where you can just fly. There we go. And on the topic of highway driving, I thought that I should show you guys how this thing is on the highway, because the highway is really where this car shines, I think. Very smooth, very planted as well. Foot down. Very smooth at these high speeds. I will say the brakes on the highway don't feel as keen as they do going slower. But on the freeway, let go of the steering wheel, perfect alignment. So we've now concluded the drive of the Mercedes CLK 320, and I would say it was a fantastic experience. This thing is as smooth, slick, and as serene as it ever was. You glide right over the bumps. This thing is very comfortable. Wind noise, there was a little bit, but it wasn't too bad, especially compared to other convertibles. On the low points, I would say, is the driving experience. It wasn't as keen to give you the driver's feedback, the brake pedal feel, the steering feel as, say, an E46 3 Series, which on a size basis would be the comparison. But this is a lot nicer than those cars and a lot more comfortable. But with that, let's go ahead and give it a score. The utility category. The Mercedes CLK rides very nice. No bumps in this car feel too jarring. However, the rear seat room is pitiful with a top up. I'm a 6'2" male for reference. My head is at the roof and my knees have zero room. On top of that, there's not very much trunk space, so it gets 3.5 out of 10. Features. It has a lot of little things. The semi-automatic rear seats, auto-adjusting volume on the radio based on speed, 3 memory settings, and more. The materials are also good. The wood doesn't look too tacky or too fake, and the leather is very supple. I'll give it a 5 out of 10. The EPA rates this car a 20 combined city and highway, so it barely squeaks by with a 5 out of 10. This totals our daily score to 13.5 out of 30. In the weekend category, we have the cool factor. I think the styling is classic. This Mercedes front end was a bit odd, but like a lot of Mercedes models from this era, it aged very well. While this car isn't necessarily anything special or important, they're not that common in nice shape, and they have a retroness to them that makes them stand out a little bit. It gets 4 out of 10. Driver's feedback. There was some, but this is a bit of a low point for this car compared to a lot of comparables from the era. The pedals are on the lighter side, and the steering isn't as communicative as a sports car, but you wouldn't expect it to be. The transmission shifts are barely felt in the cabin, making it a very smooth experience. Mercedes tuned this car for luxury, not sporty driving, so it gets 3 out of 10. This car does 0 to 60 in about 7.5 seconds, giving it a 3 out of 10. This totals our weekend score to 10 out of 30. Should you buy it? It depends. Just like any old luxury car, these can be pretty maintenance heavy, especially if you pay a dealership or buy a poor example. Mercedes parts are some of the most expensive among the luxury brands, but I don't think this is a bad purchase. They aren't too hard to work on relative to other luxury cars, so I'll give it a 10 out of 15, putting it here on our list. It scores in the lower half of the list, which I attest to the not so great daily score. Our closest comparison is the E46 BMW 3 Series, which scores slightly higher in the should you buy it category. That car is better all around and stands out more as one of the all-time greats, with relatively similar maintenance. That said, these are kind of an unknown car in the used luxury two-door market, and parts are not too expensive. The V8 one might not be able to claim the same thing, but if you want an expensive feeling retro convertible on a budget, I think the Mercedes CLK 320 is definitely worth a shot.